Welcome to the Pivot Clean Energy Podcast, How the World Cooks, the energy shift you need to know about. I'm your host, Alicia Elmamouni. On this podcast, we are going to explore everything cooking, how it impacts the world, and why you should care. Let's go. Mackenzie Boubin serves as the Director of Global Ethanol Market Development for the U.S. Grains Council, a nonprofit organization that operates globally to promote the use of U.S. barley, corn, sorghum, and related products, including ethanol. In this capacity, Mackenzie oversees development and execution of the Council's global ethanol program, including strategy development, program implementation, public affairs, and strategic partnerships. Mackenzie has a broad experience in the ethanol industry. Prior to joining the council, she was the Biofuels and Industry Relations Director for the Minnesota Corn Growers Association, and prior to that was with the Minnesota Biofuels Association. Today, Mackenzie is going to share about the council's role within ethanol exports and specifically touch on emerging markets like SAF, maritime, and of course, clean cooking solutions. We are going to talk about how Grains Council is working to support market development globally for this new commodity opportunity and the larger partnerships they are leveraging to accomplish heavy lifts around trade regulation and tariffs. Hear about the challenges they see for this growing industry, specific things they are doing to foster growth, as well as the things they and their constituents are most excited about within clean cooking. Don't miss this candid conversation packed with information from Mackenzie and her expertise in helping to expand the nascent clean cooking market. Mackenzie, it's such a delight to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Alicia. Super excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Today, the topic is going to focus on global markets and some of the opportunities that exist in the bioethanol world for emerging markets and what that means in particular for bioethanol cooking. And so you're coming to us from the U.S. Grains Council, who have a ton of expertise around exports. So I just can't wait to dive into this conversation today.
It's a fun topic to talk about for sure. So yeah, one of the bright spots in ag right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And U.S. Grains Council is one of the founding members of Pivot. They've been with us since the beginning, and you yourself joined the board in 2022. You've been a huge industry champion for us. We're so grateful to have you. And at U.S. Grains, you're currently the Director of Global Ethanol Export Development. Can you give a little background on the council and its role around the world?
Absolutely. So for those who are unfamiliar, the U.S. Grains Council is essentially the export trade association for the U.S. agricultural supply chain. So we work very similar and in line with like the National Corn Growers Association, Growth Energy, Renewable Fuels Association. All of those entities are really more focused on the domestic market, and we are solely focused on international markets. So either one, maintaining markets, or really growing market access for U.S. commodities. So we represent, again, like the corn industry, the barley industry, the sorghum industry, and then of course the corn co-products, right? So DDGs, and then bioethanol as well. So all the 200 bioethanol plants, all the different input companies, the fertilizer companies, the rail companies, genetic organizations, etc., all members of the U.S. Grains Council, which really empowers us when we go out to develop markets, right? That we can have that backing, right, of the U.S. industry. Also, we are an official agricultural cooperator with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So a significant amount of funding from the U.S. government, again, that really allows us to go out and do what they can't, that we have the access to the commercial industry, and then also, again, foreign governments, foreign private stakeholders, etc., to really go out and get after it. So we're the bioethanol team within the U.S. Grains Council, and really, I think, have an exciting story about what's been going on with bioethanol.
Yeah. Okay. What a great explanation of how the council works. And you guys obviously have a huge spread, not only across the US, but also around the world. And as you mentioned, you are specific to bioethanol. So, how did you get into your current position? What was the path that brought you to where you are right now?
I feel very fortunate, I think, to be in the current role. It's a dream role for me, but have been in the industry a long time. Goodness, I guess depending on what you think growing up on a farm is. industry, I'd say my whole life, but
Yes.
certainly I think even started right when I was in high school, like driving our local corn to the two ethanol plants that we have in our area. I grew up in southern Minnesota, longtime Minnesotan. So actually started my career with the Minnesota Biofuels Association, so the state trade association that represents the 22 ethanol plants within Minnesota. Did a stint over on the fuel side with CHS, and kind of did some of their more like retail operations, right, with a lot of like the Cenex stations, and then of course the co-ops that supply the fuel. So got to learn and understand that industry and dynamic. Then went over to the Minnesota Corn Growers Association and was their biofuel director. So got that checkoff association experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been here. So it's been a great road. Really, again, passionate about the ethanol industry and, the huge success story that we're able to say for multiple different reasons, right? Again, we always like to say in the council, it's like, what size shirt can we get you, with like how to message our story for bioethanol, like
Mm-hmm.
energy diversification and, environment, rural empowerment, etc.
Yeah. Touches so many different sectors. Within export markets, which you guys are currently working on, can you just provide some perspective on what U.S. exports look like in the bioethanol world? Who our major trading partners are? What countries are we most aligned with when it comes to that?
Yeah, so this is where, again, huge bright spot. I think in terms of like export commodities, ethanol is one of the fastest growing export commodities. Really had a lot of momentum going into COVID, lost a lot of that, really bounced back since then. So this is where I think we're excited to talk about for marketing year numbers. That's what the US government data goes on. We are on track for a record marketing year export number.
Hmm.
So this is where the previous export marketing year record was like 1.6 billion gallons. We're potentially on track for 1.7, 1.8. It's not over quite yet, but we've been really seeing some strong numbers here. So one, that overall story, right, of like overall export markets, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's great to hear. But then when you narrow down about like where is it going, right? I think historically, like, when we first entered the ethanol export market, which really didn't start right until like, goodness, the late 2010s. This is where again really dependent on like China, Brazil, etc. But now we really actually don't send to those markets, and so we talk about like market diversification. But
Mm-hmm.
really like top five strong markets, right? So Canada, typically about a third of our overall export market potential. And even seeing that grow, they're a consistent market for us. They just recently, 2 years ago, released their Canadian fuel regulation. So we love, of course, lots of synergy, right, with Canada, just right.
Yeah.
But then also other top markets are the EU and the UK. Again, there was actually like a ban on US ethanol exports into the UK until recently, also within the EU. And so it was great to see this market open up, really seeing the shift toward one, like more petrol, like hybrid vehicles, right?
Mm.
So then this is also, I think, transitioning into increased consumption and this E10 wave that we're seeing within the EU. So just within the last 3 years, we've had like 10 member states announce that they're transitioning to E10. So I think we're at
Wow.
17 out of like the 23 member states that now have like E10. So just kind of getting those last final movers to be able to transition all of the EU, right?
Mm-hmm.
E10, because that's kind of the status quo, and that should be the status quo, and then we build from there. So really excited to see those two markets, India coming on strong, this
Mm-hmm.
Japan always coming on strong, and then some of these new, more like Southeast Asia markets, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia, seeing a lot of potential, and then even recent movements there as well, with like the introduction either of like a ethanol pilot, or even now in the Philippines, they announced a move to a E20 discretionary blend. So
Okay.
lots of success stories. Again, it's not, I think early on, we talked a lot about like, okay, what was the US model? What did the US do? How can you duplicate or right size, what the US like version was? But now it's like there's so many different models to choose from because every country is like right sizing it for themselves or choosing
Mm-hmm.
path, but consumers are really familiar with it, and governments, I think, are pursuing it, right? For all those multiple reasons we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to take a step back for listeners who might not be familiar with some of the terminology, can you just describe real quick E10, E20, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah, sorry, you're right. When you've been in the industry so
Yeah.
but the E before it essentially represents the percentage of the product that is within the gasoline supplies. When we talk about an E10, that means your traditional gasoline that you're going with and filling up at the pump, but it contains a 10% ethanol blend. So then if we do E15, it's a 15% ethanol blend, E20, 20%, all the way up to E85, right? So 85% ethanol, 15% petrol or gasoline that you can use in your existing internal combustion engine cars or hybrids.
Perfect. Thank you. And so it sounds like these markets are kind of shifting, they're dynamic. You have some countries that might be decreasing demand, you've got others that are really ramping up. And so, how does that benefit US producers, but also the countries on the receiving end when they're, increasing their imports of ethanol from the US?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, right, the vision and the goal and like the reason the US Grains Council is around is to like move the US product. So whether that, of course, well, actually our motto is move that grain, right? So whether that is in the form of like an actual bushel or of course now in the term bioethanol, it's a gallon. So either way, like we're moving and creating a market, either like new market pull or like a high value market, right? For some of these like low carbon ethanol markets, etc. But then additionally, it's just having like the demand and this longevity, right? With like US agricultural commodities. Because I think we always talk about, right? The growth opportunity, for so many of the US products, it's outside of our borders. And so
Hmm.
again, the US Grains Council really, I think, seeks to bridge that gap and go where like the markets aren't or going where, again, like we see opportunity. But in terms of the other countries that are taking our product, right? So again, why would countries decide to pursue like a bioethanol agenda or a blend? And so, like we said, we will tailor our approach accordingly to like what the country is looking for. Do they have bioethanol as part of their like nationally determined contributions as their like Paris climate agreements, right? So
Hmm.
are we trying to meet their environmental goals or their ambitions to be net zero or net negative, right, by 2050? And bioethanol is a great component and immediately available component to be able to achieve that.
Hmm.
Other countries, I think, are looking for it similar to why the US did, right? We were dependent on foreign sources of oil. We wanted to empower our very robust, thriving agricultural industry at home. So certain countries, of course, don't have the capacity to actually have a domestic market, but when they really, I think, show that like one, they are committed to like maintaining the blend, and then also like, we're not going to compromise on it. Let's import US product at the front end, really show proof of concept, show that it can work, and then again,
Sure.
work to build out, right, your internal domestic industry. That's exactly what the United States did, right? We were in a
Hmm.
for a long time, and now we're the top bioethanol producer in the world. So
Hmm.
get that question a lot, right? Bioethanol is abundant, it's affordable, it's sustainable, and it's compatible with existing infrastructure. So every country is again like very nuanced, I think, about why they're pursuing it, but we can really achieve, right, one of like 4 to 12 different boxes that a country is looking for when they're looking to start a bioethanol blending program.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we see that same thing in the cooking sector where you mentioned, they might not have capacity to provide for some of these low carb fuels that they want to be using, whether that's transportation or cooking. And so imports are a great way to get that started. And I know you guys have seen that in several countries just as of late. And so we can talk about that a little bit more too. But and then as these countries get online with getting more bioethanol into their gasoline, into their cooking systems, they can also be developing their own market too. And so bioethanol can be used for industrial use, for beverages. We're all familiar with that. For blending with gasoline, as you mentioned. But I know along with cooking, there's some emerging markets that the council is seeing. And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you hit it, Alicia. This is something where historically, traditionally, it's like ethanol has been used within like on road transportation, right? Within like existing light duty vehicles. It's always like the famous industry quote. It's like, what did the first, Henry Ford vehicle run on for the
Hmm.
Model T? It was ethanol. And so
Right.
that has, of course, been our foundation, but it actually is a really exciting space because exactly like you mentioned, now these like are these new use markets. So I think a lot of people are talking about SAF, right? So SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and the role that like ethanol can play to that has like an approved ASTM pathway for alcohol to jet. That can be like a significant market opportunity for ethanol's ability to decarbonize the aviation sector. Very
Hmm.
similar to maritime applications, right? So again, like long haul shipping industries, even short haul shipping. A huge majority of our goods and services around the world are shipped via again like these big transportation haulers, and so
Yeah.
it's how you decarbonize that fuel. So very really, I think specifically to like the aviation industry, the maritime industry, even heavy duty trucking, right? Those are like harder to electrify sectors. And so this
Yes.
again, you look at what's going on in the fuel, and ethanol of course has a significant amount of emissions reductions today, but also has the capacity to be net negative very much in the near future. So like those three industries I think are big targets for us. But again, the biochemical industry and even like the compound ethylene, right? Like what ethylene that you can make from ethanol, like what that can be used for in a wide
Hmm.
variety of products. And I think we're really seeing that shift from global consumers wanting the green product, but now you don't have to play or pay the green premium because ethanol is inherently cheaper to produce than a lot of
Mm.
counterparts. And then, like you said, clean cooking. I think this is one that the council is really excited about. One, I think, of course, just because of the message that it stands for in terms of clean cooking, but it's a whole untapped market that we really have not pursued before. And so learning a lot, I think kudos to you about, educating the council and our members on the importance of this industry and then like what it could mean, right, for a lot of continued market access and then diversification as well.
Yeah. And, we're excited that you're excited about clean cooking because it is so near and dear to our heart. But also that huge market opportunity that is very largely untapped right now. And so, with clean cooking being one of those emerging markets, what is your estimate on the time frame that it might take for that to scale compared to some of these other developing markets you mentioned, like SAF or maritime?
Oh goodness. I mean, I'd almost ask you that question, Alicia. This is a question we get a lot from our members, right? So I think one, like exposing them to even like the concept of this industry, like the subcategory of like what bioethanol is. But of course, I think understanding that, each individual cook stove, of course, is like itself very small gallons, but then overall, it's like,
Hmm.
what is the market that like are the potential amount of people that are looking for this? I think you kind of continuously reiterate to us, right? Even in Africa, right? What close to 1 billion households I think are still looking, for that solution toward
Hmm.
cooking. And then similarly, I think now our efforts in India. And so this is where again, I think your estimate is around 300 million households that also, right, are looking for clean cooking solutions. So while I don't have a gallon percentage or a timeline, and those are big numbers. And so
Yeah.
again, what role can like the council play along with our other stakeholder partners, Pivot, our domestic associations, our multilateral groups, US government to really go out, right, and pursue these type of market potentials.
Hmm. Do you think there are some things about it that might make it easier to scale or take less time to scale than SAF or maritime, where there's still a lot of research going on around, what those fuel blends look like or how the applications look like?
I think I've been learning a lot from you that like, if there is synergy with like a fuel grade in terms of like also having clean cooking at the same time, like that I think really builds like a bridge to like,
Hmm.
immediate like increased access to it or again like overcoming some of these more like tariff or non-tariff barriers associated with the product. And so even I think seeing some of these successful programs like in large cities, like what we're seeing in Nairobi, Kenya, an example with like the cocoa pit stove. Been talking, of course, now with the program being instituted in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So this is where, again, you're seeing, I think, these very targeted approaches that I think are really building off success. And so now it's like more visibility, more eyes on it, more
Hmm.
concept, etc., that I think is like driving further either interest or like support or movement within this space.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're right. It's going to take multiple factors, that regulatory certainty, the education and social awareness, the infrastructure, and you kind of need all those things to come together. But when you can couple it with the blending infrastructure that might already be in place or some regulatory policies that might already be in existence for blending, that could maybe smooth the pathway out a little bit for cooking.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been fortunate to be able to partner on a number of clean cooking related initiatives. And one of those involves an MOU between Pivot, US Grains Council, and the Ministry of Energy in Mozambique. And so, can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and how that helps accomplish goals for, as you mentioned previously, both clean cooking and transportation at the same time, as well as benefits the government of Mozambique?
Yeah, I think this is something one we're so grateful for, Alicia, right? Like our engagement, like on the board and then through like the industry involvement within Pivot, I don't really think we would have known like about some of these opportunities. So this is where really excited I think about the partnership between Pivot and then of course the government of Mozambique to pursue these initiatives. So of course, just like you said, I think what we're excited about is that two-pronged approach where they of course are now trying to instill right these clean cooking opportunities with ethanol to really I think aid in like a lot of the humanitarian like human health aspects within their own local constituents, but then of course simultaneously pursue an E10 blending program, which of course we also think right like will lower consumer costs and also decarbonize a lot of like what their ambitions are I think on the Mozambique side. So this is where again we are of course like an immediately available solution to supplying what Mozambique wants both within clean cooking and on the fuel grade side. But this is where showing proof of concept, showing that the pilots are working, showing that again, like the policy has teeth and like it actually is going to be enforced really paves the way to like the local industry, right? To start putting forward
Mhm.
significant financial investments to be able to build out the own local bioethanol industry in Mozambique. So I think that's a great story. And so let the US partner and build the program while again, like you're showing again, like this is successful, this will work. And now we have the confidence, right? Has like the local industry to move forward with it.
Mhm.
And exactly like you have kind of educated us as well, Mozambique is well positioned within that geographic area to really show whatever they're doing is going to permeate to the other regional partners as well, right? So Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, etc. So what Mozambique does, they will follow shortly thereafter. So now you're not just getting a country success story, but like a regional success story with all of those different countries as well. And meeting their constituents, right? And helping them for the
Mhm.
exact same reason that Mozambique decided to pursue it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the goal, right? To empower these countries, let them pursue these activities that they want to with the resources they have, but also come alongside and provide some of that education, some of the investment, some of the capacity building that's needed.
Yeah.
In addition to Mozambique, we've also seen a lot of global traction around clean cooking lately. There was a biofuel summit in India through the ATM that US Grains Council was part of this year. The IEA held a Clean Cooking in Africa summit in Paris in May. There's upcoming G20 meetings, COP29. Can you just talk about some of those unified efforts and how bioethanol cooking is fitting into those?
Yeah, this is where you're really showing, Alicia, that like Pivot was such like a first mover in this space, right? You guys have been in it for a number of years. I think US Grains Council is a little like later to the party in terms of clean cooking. And then big multilateral institutions are even further back. So I think one, I mean, we're so excited that like now you're getting this big international attention like on this specific industry, and not just like clean cooking in general, but like bioethanol clean cooking, right? So a lot of like verbiage, rhetoric, acknowledgement, like financial resources that I think are being like accumulated to be able to like solve, right, these
Hmm.
cooking like needs around the world, and then specifically calling out bioethanol as like one of the solutions for
Right.
the cooking platform. So we're so excited, I think, to see now, one like the Global Biofuel Alliance, like recognize this, pursue it, put forth like side meeting agendas, etc., like specifically to discuss this topic. Same thing, right? The International Energy Agency had that huge forum back in May, right? Yeah, in May,
Hmm.
to address this topic. And so, yeah, this is where, the clean cooking industry overall is a huge, huge industry. But if the bioethanol industry and again, some of our other counterparts aren't there, like we certainly always want to be a part of the conversation and like acknowledged, right, for like the efforts that we can bring. But
Hmm.
that being said, I feel like it's a whole new audience that like we typically have not held captive before, like with like our speaking points, or we're not familiar with our product. And so this is where I think we're really excited about like the world's interest in
Yeah.
bioethanol for clean cooking. Because sometimes, right, you got your naysayers or people who are against bioethanol, like specifically within the transportation sector. Of course, you have some people that are just like, good is the enemy of perfect, or great is the enemy of perfect. But no one, I think, really, from my experience, has like spoken poorly about bioethanol for clean cooking, because it is
Hmm.
one of the premier solutions out there. Like it already is one of the perfect
Yeah.
solutions.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, obviously, we agree. We're promoting it because we do think that it's such a great option, and along the whole supply chain, starting with agriculture and moving along up. And so we're really excited to see it gaining a lot of traction on the global front as well, and getting more dialogue from some of those laterals as well. And so, you guys might be a little bit late to the party, but you're bringing the cake and the confetti, and you guys are going to make it into something a lot bigger than what we could just do on our own. And that's the beauty of these partnerships. So, the other thing I wanted to talk about was that there's an opportunity that US Grains has with this RAP grant that came through USDA, and it's specific to clean cooking. And so, I just wanted you to touch on that a little bit and talk about some of the opportunities and activities that US Grains is looking to do through that.
Yeah. So again, I think for those unfamiliar, RAP stands for Regional Agricultural Promotion. So RAP. So that is what we're looking for. It was a concept from the Biden administration. Again, I think to supplant what the Trump administration did for their ATP funding, which was agricultural trade promotion. So we have ATP and now RIP. So this is where, again, a huge funding initiative by the US Department of Agriculture to go out and pursue, again, these like new use markets. They specifically had like an allocation set aside for sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of your activities just happen to take place geographically. And
Hmm.
so the US Grains Council, in our grant submission, right, so we partnered with Pivot. This is where, again, you guys provided a lot of insights, because this was, again, a newer market for us, right, associated with clean cooking, to go out and actually ask, right, for support, both financially, and then, of course, again, with maybe more like higher visibility events, or like recognition, or again, tariff support from the US government to address this specific category of bioethanol. So our DC team, of course, like is working on these clean cooking initiatives. Our Sub-Saharan Africa team is working on it, as well as our India team as well. So even I think with broader applications, possibly, right, in some of our Latin America markets, or even our Southeast Asia markets, etc. So I think the council is excited to now use, right, these new government funds to really go out and pursue and complement what Pivot and our other stakeholders are doing within this market.
Hmm. Yeah, so excited to see the result of that grant and some of the things that are going to come to fruition through that. So just grateful for all of the support from the council on that as well, and you guys pushing those initiatives forward, and giving the business operators on the ground some real practical opportunity to grow their businesses and scale.
Exactly.
What have you personally seen as some of the biggest challenges coming into this clean cooking space, especially when it comes into entering new markets? Are there certain things that you've noticed are like, ooh, that's a challenge, different than what we see in the transportation industry?
Yeah, I actually would say similar to the transportation
Hmm.
industry. It's a very like cost conscious market, right? So like
Ah,
anything that has like an influence on increasing costs, whether it is like a tariff, right? If there's like a 10% tariff, 30% tariff, I mean, we're working in like such again like very consumer conscious markets that like every penny counts. And so anything
mhm,
added to that is like a huge hurdle to overcome. And then in addition to tariffs, right? Then we talk about the VAT, right? Like these tax duties, also on top of like potential imported ethanol coming in. So this is where, you know, bigger than what Pivot or what U.S. Grains Council can do. Like these are huge aspects that really influence a market, and it's very
mhm.
hard for a singular organization to influence and remove those. And that's where
Yeah.
I now having these multilateral institutions or the US government really like backing and supporting this is where we're going to see movement. Like once they have
Hmm.
in and see the opportunity, like they're the ones that can address tariffs, they're the ones that do trade agreements, they're the ones that address VATs, etc.
Yeah.
And I think once you address those, then you get into exactly what you guys are doing: education, familiarity, infrastructure, supply chain logistics, etc. But
Hmm.
if it doesn't make economic sense, I think on the front end with some of those barriers, it really is a hard sell for a country even to consider it.
Yeah. 100%. And on the flip side of that, as Grains Council is getting more involved in the clean cooking space, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, and this is where I think, we're getting our members excited about it as well. We're just coming off our big summer membership meeting. And so this is just, it's a great story to tell, right? And like, it's so tangible. So,
Mhm.
of course, I mean, again, in the transportation side, we love talking about, if you use E15 the whole year, it's like you're reducing what, like, 200 pounds of carbon, etc. It's like that's tangible. You can like see 200 pounds. You can like, visualize 200
Yeah.
pounds. But when you're talking more about, again, like women empowerment, or again like children who are like able to like go off and like get educated, right, because they're not going and they're foraging for fuel sources, etc. It's like, wow, that is such a great success story. And we just love touting and seeing again like what we're hearing again from people on the ground, and how this is truly is like a life-changing aspect, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's what our members really buy into. Like, one, of course, it's a market opportunity, but I think more importantly, it's like a huge humanitarian story. And this is where,
Mhm.
when we talked earlier about, some of these big global institutions, I think that's why they're so bought into it as well. It's a really hard thing to like, I mean, not even fight against, but it's like, talk negatively about it.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Well, we're really happy that you guys are getting more involved and really pushing the messaging forward and just putting the effort in to really make it happen and to expand access to clean cooking with bioethanol as well. So, very, very grateful for the work the council is doing.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I really appreciate it. I think all the hand holding you've done with us, Alicia, too. I think one, just to educate our members and educate, I think one, like how we articulate to the US government, etc. I think this is why the partnership has been so beneficial.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to work with you guys. We're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I always have to end with my typical foodie question. And our listeners can't tell, but you are currently pregnant right now, and you're toward the end of your pregnancy. Just to be cliche, have you had any of those cravings, or what's been your favorite thing to eat or cook during the last several months?
Well, goodness, Alicia, DC, of course, is a huge foodie town.
Yes.
I mean, access to literally like any type of cuisine in Washington, D.C. But I feel like the running joke for me has been like, this baby is being built on mac and cheese and milkshakes. So I could probably be a lot better about it, but that's just like, I don't know, that's what it's crying out for. So,
You're supporting our farmers like wholeheartedly, the dairy industry. That's awesome. Well, Mackenzie, I really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit about where the council's at with not only bioethanol exports, but this new emerging space in clean cooking. And So just thank you for sharing your expertise and your thoughts on it, and for all the support in pushing this forward.
Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate your guidance and leadership.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening. With over a third of the world's population lacking access to modern solutions and cooking with solid and polluting fuels like wood, charcoal, and kerosene, there are huge global impacts in multiple sectors. Pivot is passionate about opening access to household energy options around the world that also lead to reduced emissions, improved health outcomes, environmental protection, greater purchasing power, gender equity, and so much more. Join us for these personal conversations with farmers, fuel producers, distributors, stove manufacturers, policymakers, and consumers to learn about the dynamics that influence how people cook around the world. Please reach out to us at hello@pivotcleanenergy.org to find out how you can get involved. And we'd also be grateful if you found this information valuable and pass it along to friends, family, colleagues, your mailman, your grocer, anyone you know, and find some way to engage. Don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts like LinkedIn and Twitter. Check out our website at pivotcleanenergy.org. And of course, follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts so you can catch the next episode when it drops.